I discovered just how crazy my homeowners association really was on a freezing January morning when I found a notice taped to my front door demanding I provide free snow removal services to all 47 households in the Meadowbrook Estates subdivision. My name is James Xavier, and I had lived in this quiet corner of Burlington, Vermont for 3 years. I purchased my modest 2-story colonial specifically because the property taxes were reasonable and the neighborhood seemed peaceful. What I did not anticipate was how the HOA would transform from a mostly benign organization into something resembling a small dictatorship under new management. The trouble started 6 months earlier, when Patricia Henderson took over as HOA president. Patricia was everything you would imagine in a stereotypical neighborhood busybody. She was 52 years old with an asymmetrical blonde bob that she probably thought looked trendy, but mostly just looked uneven. She wore velour tracksuits in various pastel colors and had a habit of showing up unannounced at people's houses to discuss violations of rules that she had apparently invented herself. I owned a snow removal business that I had built from scratch over the past decade. It was not glamorous work, but it paid well during Vermont's brutal winters. I had 3 trucks, 2 employees, and a solid client base that kept me busy from November through March. My largest truck, a Ford F-550 with a custom Plow setup, stayed parked in my driveway most of the time. It was my pride and joy, and I had spent considerable money customizing it to handle the heaviest snowfalls. The HOA had always known about my business. It was disclosed when I purchased the property, and the previous board had no issues with it. They even contracted me a few times to handle the common areas, and I gave them a significant discount as a courtesy. Everything changed when Patricia took over. Her first move was to implement new parking restrictions. Suddenly, my work truck was too large for the driveway, according to her interpretation of the covenants. I reviewed the actual HOA documents and found nothing supporting her claim. The covenants mentioned that commercial vehicles used for business purposes were allowed as long as they were parked on the owner's property and did not create a nuisance. My truck met all those criteria. When I politely challenged her at a board meeting, Patricia's face turned an impressive shade of crimson. She was not accustomed to being contradicted, especially not in front of the dozen other homeowners who had bothered to attend. "Mr. Xavier," she said, her voice dripping with forced sweetness, "I think you will find that the board has the authority to interpret the covenants as we see fit. Your truck is an eyesore and several neighbors have complained." "Which neighbors?" I asked. She waved her hand dismissively. "That is confidential. The covenants require that complaints be documented and made available for review," I countered. Her jaw tightened. "We will table this discussion for now. That should have been my first warning to start looking for a new place to live." The parking issue died down for a few weeks, probably because Patricia realized she did not have the legal standing to pursue it. But I should have known she would find another way to make my life difficult. The notice on my door that January morning was printed on official HOA letterhead. It informed me that due to my ownership of snow removal equipment and my business operating within the community, I was now required to provide snow removal services for all homeowners' driveways at no charge. The letter claimed this was a community contribution, similar to how other homeowners volunteered for various committees. I read the notice 3 times, certain I must be misunderstanding something. They wanted me to plow 47 driveways, using my own equipment, my own fuel, my own time, and my own labor for free. The absurdity was staggering. I called an emergency meeting with my lawyer, David Chen, who specialized in property law. We had become acquainted when I purchased my house, and he had helped me with various business contracts over the years. David read the notice and actually laughed. "This is not enforceable," he said immediately. "They cannot compel you to provide professional services for free. That would be involuntary servitude, which is, unconstitutional. So I can ignore it. Legally, yes. But HOAs can make your life miserable in other ways. They can fine you for unrelated violations, real or imagined. They can file liens against your property. It becomes expensive to fight, even when you are in the right. What would you recommend?" David leaned back in his chair. "Honestly, if this HOA is being run by someone this unreasonable, and if you have the flexibility to move, I would start looking at other properties. You will spend less money moving than you will fighting an HOA board that has decided to target you." The suggestion stung. I loved my house. I had renovated the kitchen myself, refinished the hardwood floors, and built a workshop in the garage. The idea of letting Patricia Henderson drive me out of my own home was infuriating. But David was right. I had heard horror stories about HOA disputes that dragged on for years and cost tens of thousands in legal fees. Even if I won, the victory would be Pyrrhic. I decided to try reasoning with Patricia first. Maybe if I explained the situation calmly, she would understand how unreasonable her demand was. I called her that afternoon. She answered on the third ring, her voice sugary. "Hello, Patricia, this is James Xavier. I received your notice about providing snow removal services." "Oh, wonderful. I am so glad you are on board. We have a storm coming this weekend, so you will want to get started right away." "I am not on board," I said carefully. "I cannot provide free services to the entire neighborhood. I have paying clients who depend on me." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, the sweetness had evaporated. "Mr. Xavier, this is not optional. The board voted and the decision was unanimous." "How many board members voted?" "All three of us." "And did you notify homeowners that this vote was taking place?" "We are not required to notify anyone of internal board decisions. Actually, according to the bylaws, they were required to provide notice of any votes that created new assessments or obligations for homeowners. But I kept that observation to myself for the moment. "Patricia, what you are asking is illegal. You cannot force me to provide professional services for free." Her voice turned icy. "I suggest you review your covenants more carefully, Mr. Xavier. You agreed to abide by all HOA rules and decisions when you purchased your property. If you refuse to comply, we will have no choice but to fine you." "For what?" "We will find something." The threat was not even veiled. She was openly telling me that she would manufacture violations to punish me for not complying with an illegal demand. I hung up and immediately called David back. "She actually threatened you?" he asked, sounding stunned. "Word for word." "Okay, here is what we are going to do. I am going to send a cease and desist letter on your behalf. We will lay out exactly why their demand is illegal and warn them that any retaliatory fines or actions will result in a lawsuit. That might scare them into backing off." David sent the letter the next day via certified mail. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I received a notice of violation. According to Patricia, my trash cans were visible from the street, which violated the covenants. The fine was $500. My trash cans were in the same location they had been for 3 years. They were in a small alcove on the side of my house, barely visible unless you were specifically looking for them. The previous board had never mentioned them. The following week, I received another violation notice. This time, my mailbox was allegedly the wrong color. Another $500 fine. My mailbox was black. It had been black when I bought the house. The covenant specified that mailboxes should be traditional colors, but did not define what that meant. I documented everything with photographs and timestamps. David compiled it all into a harassment complaint that we filed with the state's Consumer Protection Division. Vermont has relatively strong laws protecting homeowners from abusive HOA practices, but the process was slow. Meanwhile, Patricia was not done. She called a special meeting to discuss ongoing compliance issues in the community. The meeting notice singled out my property by address, claiming there were numerous violations requiring immediate attention. I attended the meeting with David by my side. About 20 homeowners showed up, most of them looking confused about why they had been summoned on a Tuesday evening. Patricia sat at a folding table at the front of the community center, flanked by the other two board members. Gary Mitchell, a retired accountant who mostly nodded along with whatever Patricia said, and Deborah Summers, a timid woman in her 40s who looked like she regretted ever agreeing to serve on the board. "Thank you all for coming," Patricia began. "We have some serious issues to address regarding one homeowner's flagrant disregard for our community standards." She proceeded to display a slideshow on a projector screen. It showed photographs of my house from various angles. She had circled things in red: the trash cans, the mailbox, a small garden gnome my niece had given me, and even the curtains in my front window, which she claimed were not approved colors. "As you can see," Patricia continued, "Mr. Xavier has repeatedly violated our covenants. Despite multiple notices and fines, he has refused to correct these issues. We are here tonight to discuss escalating enforcement measures." I stood up. "May I respond?" Patricia looked annoyed. "We are not here to debate. We are here to inform the community of the actions we are taking." "That is not how this works," David interjected, standing beside me. "Mr. Xavier has a right to address accusations made against him. Unless you would like to add due process violations to the list of complaints we are compiling for the state," several homeowners murmured. They were starting to realize this meeting was not what Patricia had advertised. David was allowed to speak. He calmly explained that every single violation Patricia had cited was either fabricated or a misinterpretation of the covenants. He showed the sections of the governing documents that contradicted each of her claims. He also revealed the cease and desist letter and Patricia's threat to manufacture violations. "What we have here," David concluded, "is a clear case of HOA board abuse. Miss Henderson is using her position to harass my client because he refused to provide thousands of dollars worth of free labor. This is illegal, and it will not stand." The room erupted. Homeowners started asking questions, demanding to know why they had not been informed about the snow removal demand, why Patricia was targeting me, and what other decisions the board had made without proper notice. Patricia tried to regain control, but it was too late. The meeting devolved into chaos, and several homeowners announced they would be calling for a special election to remove the entire board. I felt vindicated, but also exhausted. This was exactly the kind of drama I had wanted to avoid by living in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Over the next few weeks, the situation somehow got worse. Patricia doubled down. She filed a lien against my property for the unpaid fines. David immediately took her to court, and the judge was not impressed with the HOA's behavior. "Miss Henderson," the judge said during the hearing, "do you have any evidence that Mr. Xavier's trash cans were visible from the street in violation of the covenants?" Patricia produced a photograph that she had clearly taken while standing in my driveway. "You were on his property when you took this." "I was performing my duties as HOA president." "Did Mr. Xavier give you permission to enter his property?" Patricia hesitated. "I do not need permission to enforce the covenants." The judge removed his glasses and stared at her. "Miss Henderson, you absolutely do need permission to enter private property. What you did is called trespassing. The lien is dissolved, and the HOA will pay Mr. Xavier's legal fees for this hearing. Furthermore, I am ordering the HOA to cease any enforcement actions against Mr. Xavier's property pending a full review of your governing documents and procedures. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. She tried to argue, but the judge cut her off. "We are done here," he said firmly. You would think that would have been the end of it. You would be wrong. Patricia was not someone who accepted defeat gracefully. If anything, the court ruling seemed to enrage her further. She started showing up at my house unannounced, taking photographs from the street. She sent me certified letters almost daily, each one filled with new accusations and threats. My neighbors started approaching me to apologize. Many of them had no idea what Patricia had been doing in the HOA's name. They were horrified when they learned about the snow removal demand and the manufactured violations. A group of homeowners organized a petition to remove Patricia from the board. They needed signatures from 25% of the homeowners to trigger a recall election. They easily exceeded that threshold. Patricia fought the recall, claiming the petition was invalid on various technicalities. David helped the homeowners navigate the process, and eventually a recall election was scheduled for March. But I was done. I was completely and utterly done with Meadowbrook Estates, with Patricia Henderson, and with the entire concept of homeowner associations. I started looking for a new place to live. I found a beautiful property about 30 miles outside Burlington. It was a farmhouse on 5 acres with no HOA, no neighbors close enough to complain about anything, and plenty of space for my trucks and equipment. The price was reasonable, and the owner was motivated to sell quickly. I made an offer, and it was accepted within 2 days. Now came the satisfying part. My snow removal business had been covering several driveways in Meadowbrook Estates on a contract basis, not including my own. These were paying customers who had hired me independently before Patricia's reign of terror began. The contracts were set to expire at the end of February, and I had no intention of renewing them. I also realized that the HOA itself had been relying on me for the common areas. The previous board had a standing arrangement with me, which I had continued out of habit. I was plowing the entrance to the subdivision, the small parking area near the community center, and the sidewalks along the main road. I had been charging them a very reasonable rate, well below what I charged commercial clients. I sent formal notices to all my clients in Meadowbrook Estates that I would not be renewing contracts due to relocating my primary residence. I gave them 2 weeks' notice, which was more than the contracts required. I also sent notice to the HOA that I was terminating our agreement effective immediately. Since Patricia had already indicated they wanted free services instead of paid ones, I figured she would be thrilled that I was ending our business relationship. The responses were predictable. My individual clients were disappointed but understanding. Several of them asked for recommendations for other snow removal services. I gave them a list of competitors. Patricia's response was explosive. She called me screaming about breach of contract. I calmly explained that the contract had a termination clause that I was invoking properly. She threatened to sue. I told her to feel free. What made the situation particularly interesting was that a massive storm was forecasted for late February. Weather reports were predicting up to 18 inches of snow, with high winds and dangerous conditions. It was the kind of storm that required professional equipment to handle properly. I closed on my new farmhouse in early February. The previous owner had left behind an old tractor and some other equipment, which was a nice bonus. I spent 2 weeks moving my belongings, piece by piece. The recall election was scheduled for the first week of March, but I would not be there to see it. My last day in Meadowbrook Estates was February 20th. The day I moved my big plow truck out of the subdivision for the last time, I felt a genuine sense of relief. I had every single piece of my equipment loaded and ready. The truck rumbled as I drove past Patricia's house. She was standing in her front yard, watching me with her arms crossed and a furious expression on her face. I waved. She did not wave back. The storm hit on February 22nd, 2 days after I had fully relocated. I was comfortable in my farmhouse, watching the snow fall from my living room window. My nearest neighbor was half a mile away. There was no HOA to answer to, no Patricia to manufacture violations, no drama whatsoever. My phone started ringing around 8 in the morning. It was Gary Mitchell, the accountant from the HOA board. "James, we have a situation," he said, sounding panicked. "The storm is worse than expected, and we do not have anyone to plow the common areas." "I terminated my contract 2 weeks ago," I reminded him. "I know, but this is an emergency. People cannot get out of the subdivision." "You should contact another snow removal service. We have been trying. Everyone is booked solid because of the storm. You are the only person we know who has immediate availability." "I do not have availability. I am not taking new clients right now." There was a pause. "Patricia said you would do this." "Do what?" Refused to help out of spite. I felt a surge of anger. "Gary, I spent months being harassed by your board president. She tried to force me to work for free, then retaliated with fake violations when I refused. She trespassed on my property and filed a bogus lien that cost me time and money to fight. I do not owe you or anyone else in that subdivision anything. Hire another service." I hung up. Over the next few hours, I received calls from several Meadowbrook Estates residents. Most were polite, asking if I could make an exception just this once. I explained that I was no longer operating in that area and suggested they coordinate with neighbors to share the cost of hiring someone from further away. Then, Patricia called. "You are legally obligated to maintain the common areas," she said without preamble. "No, I am not. I terminated the contract. You cannot just abandon a community in a crisis. Watch me. This is unconscionable. People are stranded." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you spent months trying to force me to work for free and harassing me when I refused. I will make sure everyone knows you refused to help. Please do. Make sure you also tell them why I moved away." She hung up on me. I learned later that Meadowbrook Estates had to hire a company from nearly 50 miles away. The company charged emergency rates, which were roughly triple the normal price. The HOA had to take out a short-term loan to cover the cost, which would be passed on to homeowners through a special assessment. The recall election proceeded as scheduled on March 4th. Patricia Henderson was removed from the board by an overwhelming margin. Gary Mitchell and Deborah Summers both resigned rather than face their own recall votes. A new board was elected, made up of homeowners who actually wanted to serve the community rather than rule over it. One of their first actions was to review all of Patricia's decisions and reverse most of them. They also issued a formal apology to me, which was forwarded to my new address. The apology was nice, but unnecessary. I had already moved on, both literally and figuratively. Life at the farmhouse was everything I had hoped for. I had space to work on my equipment without anyone complaining. I could park my trucks wherever I wanted. I could paint my mailbox purple if I felt like it, though I had no desire to do so. My business actually improved after the move. Word spread about what had happened at Meadowbrook Estates, and I received several new clients who were impressed by how I had stood my ground against an abusive HOA. Apparently, principled stubbornness was good for business. In April, I received a letter from a law firm representing several homeowners from Meadowbrook Estates. My first thought was that Patricia was suing me for something absurd. Instead, the letter was an invitation to join a class action lawsuit against Patricia Henderson personally. Apparently, after she was removed from the board, the new leadership conducted an audit and discovered she had been misappropriating HOA funds. Small amounts at first, just a few $100s here and there for personal expenses that she disguised as HOA business. But over her 6-month tenure, she had stolen nearly $15,000. The audit also revealed that the other violations and fines she had issued to various homeowners, not just me, were part of a pattern of abuse. She had been using the HOA as her personal fiefdom, punishing anyone who questioned her authority. I was invited to join the lawsuit because I had documented evidence of her harassment and the illegal demand for free services. My records and David's legal correspondence would strengthen the case. I agreed to participate. David was already involved as counsel for several other homeowners, so it was a natural fit. The lawsuit was filed in May. Patricia tried to claim she had immunity as an HOA board member, but the judge rejected that argument. Board members are protected when they act in good faith within their authority. Patricia had done neither. The discovery phase was eye-opening. Patricia's financial records showed she had spent HOA money on everything from personal vacations to expensive dinners, always with receipts that claimed they were HOA-related. She had taken a trip to Florida and called it research for potential community improvements. She had bought an entire new wardrobe and claimed it was necessary for representing the HOA at official functions that never actually occurred. But the most damning evidence was emails. Patricia had been communicating with her 2 board members, Gary and Deborah, about various schemes. Gary had apparently been complicit in some of the financial irregularities, though to a lesser degree. Deborah had mostly been kept in the dark and had only signed off on things because Patricia assured her everything was proper. The emails also showed Patricia's true feelings about the homeowners. She called us peasants, idiots, and worse. She explicitly stated in one email that she intended to force me out of the neighborhood because I was not sufficiently respectful of her authority. When confronted with this evidence during depositions, Patricia's lawyer looked like he wanted to quit on the spot. There was no defending her actions. It was all documented in black and white. The lawsuit was settled out of court in September. Patricia agreed to pay back all the misappropriated funds plus damages to the homeowners she had harassed. The total was over $70,000. Her homeowner's insurance refused to cover it because she had acted with intentional misconduct, so it came directly from her personal assets. She also faced criminal charges. The state attorney general's office got involved once the extent of the embezzlement became clear. In November, Patricia Henderson pleaded guilty to theft and misconduct in office. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, though the judge allowed her to serve it as house arrest with electronic monitoring given her lack of prior criminal history. She was also ordered to perform 300 hours of community service and placed on probation for 3 years. The whole saga became something of a local news story. Vermont is a small state, and a HOA president being convicted of embezzlement was interesting enough to warrant coverage. A reporter from the Burlington Free Press interviewed me about my experience. I kept the interview factual and unemotional. I explained what had happened, how I had tried to resolve things reasonably, and why I ultimately decided to move. The reporter was particularly interested in the demand that I provide free snow removal services. Did you ever consider just doing it? She asked. I mean, you live in the neighborhood, you have the equipment. Would it have been easier to just comply? No, I said firmly. Because it was not about the snow removal, it was about an abuse of power. If I had given in, Patricia would have just found something else to demand. People like that do not stop when you appease them. They escalate. The article ran with the headline, Former HOA President Sentenced After Harassment Campaign Against Homeowner. It was accurate and fair. I received dozens of messages after the article published. Most were supportive, from people who had their own HOA horror stories. A few accused me of being vindictive for not helping during the storm, but I did not let those bother me. People who have never dealt with an abusive HOA do not understand the toll it takes. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. I expanded my business, hiring a third employee and purchasing another truck. The farmhouse needed some work, which I tackled during the off-season. I built a proper barn for equipment storage and renovated the kitchen. I also started dating someone I met through a client referral. Her name was Helen Zimmerman, and she owned a small cafe in Burlington. We bonded over shared experiences with difficult customers, though her stories about demanding coffee drinkers seemed almost quaint compared to my Patricia Henderson saga. Helen thought the whole HOA situation was absurd. You mean she wanted you to plow 47 driveways for free? And thought that was reasonable. She did not think of it as free labor, I explained. She thought of it as me contributing to the community. But you were contributing. You paid HOA fees like everyone else. Logic was not Patricia's strong suit. Helen shook her head. I could never live in an HOA. The idea of someone having that much control over my property would drive me crazy. You and me both, I agreed. By the time December rolled around and the first significant snow of the season began falling, I had been in my farmhouse for 10 months. I was plowing my long driveway, watching the snow pile up in neat rows when my phone rang. It was David Chen. James, I wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia Henderson violated her house arrest. What? She cut off her ankle monitor and apparently fled the state. The authorities are looking for her. Why would she do that? She only had a few more months left. My understanding is that she was facing additional civil suits from other people she harassed. She was looking at potentially losing her house. I guess she decided running was easier. Where did she go? No one knows yet, but I wanted you to be aware in case she tries to contact you or cause trouble. I thanked David for the warning, though I could not imagine why Patricia would want to contact me. I was the last person she would reach out to. I was wrong about that too. 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, postmarked from somewhere in Florida. The handwriting on the envelope was neat and feminine. Inside was a single page handwritten. Mr. Xavier, I know you think I am a terrible person. Maybe I am. But you need to understand that I was trying to build something special in Meadowbrook Estates. I had a vision for what that community could be, and people like you kept getting in the way with your rules and your lawyers. All I wanted was for you to contribute to the community. Was that so wrong? You had the equipment, you had the ability to help, but you refused because of pride, and now I have lost everything. My reputation, my home, my freedom. I hope you are happy. Patricia. I read the letter twice, then threw it away. There was no point in responding. Patricia was never going to understand that she had brought all of this on herself. In her mind, she was the victim, persecuted for trying to do good. I reported the letter to the authorities, providing the postmark information. They thanked me but said it was not much to go on. Patricia would eventually be found, or she would not. Either way, it was not my problem anymore. The rest of the winter passed without incident. My business had its best season yet. Helen and I spent Christmas together at the farmhouse, and she loved how peaceful it was compared to her apartment in the city. We talked about her maybe moving in, but agreed to take things slow. In March, almost exactly 1 year after the Meadowbrook Estates recall election, I received another call from David. They found Patricia, he said. She was in Tampa, working under a fake name at a real estate office. Someone recognized her from the news coverage. What happens now? She will be extradited back to Vermont. Her house arrest will be revoked, and she will serve the rest of her sentence in actual prison. She will also face additional charges for fleeing. Good, I said simply. Patricia Henderson was brought back to Vermont in early April. She appeared before the same judge who had sentenced her originally. He was not pleased. Miss Henderson, I gave you a lenient sentence because I believed you had the capacity to take responsibility for your actions and rehabilitate yourself. You have demonstrated that my faith was misplaced. I am revoking your house arrest. You will serve the remainder of your sentence in the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility, plus an additional 6 months for violating the terms of your release. Patricia tried to speak, but the judge cut her off. I do not want to hear it. You had every opportunity to do the right thing, and at every turn you made the wrong choice. Perhaps some time behind bars will give you the perspective you clearly lack. She was led away in handcuffs. I watched from the gallery, having been invited by David to attend. I felt no satisfaction in seeing her imprisoned. Mostly, I just felt sad that it had come to this. After the hearing, several of the homeowners from Meadowbrook Estates approached me. They wanted to thank me for standing up to Patricia and for helping with the lawsuit. You know, one of them said, the new board has done a great job. We actually have a functional HOA now. People volunteer for committees because they want to, not because they are being forced. We are even planning a neighborhood barbecue this summer. That is great, I said sincerely. I am glad things worked out. Would you ever consider moving back? I laughed. No offense, but I am very happy where I am. No HOA, no drama, just peace and quiet. They nodded, understanding completely. Life continued to improve. My business kept growing, and I was able to give my employees significant raises. Helen decided to sell her apartment and move in with me. We talked about maybe getting married eventually, but there was no rush. We were happy. Sometimes I drove past the Meadowbrook Estates entrance when I was in that part of town. The subdivision looked nice. The common areas were well maintained. There were kids playing in the yards and people walking their dogs. It looked like the kind of place I had hoped it would be when I first moved in. But I had no regrets about leaving. Some situations cannot be salvaged, no matter how much effort you put in. When a HOA board decides to abuse its power, the only winning move is to remove yourself from their jurisdiction. Patricia Henderson served her full sentence and was released in early 2027. By then, I had largely forgotten about her. My life had moved on. Helen and I had gotten married in a small ceremony at the farmhouse. My business had expanded to cover 3 counties. I had even hired a property manager to handle the administrative work so I could focus on the actual snow removal. I heard through David that Patricia had moved to another state after her release. She was living with a relative somewhere in Arizona, trying to rebuild her life. The conviction meant she could never serve on an HOA board again, which seemed like a fitting punishment. I thought about her sometimes, usually when I was plowing snow and had time to let my mind wander. I wondered if she had ever realized how unnecessary all of it had been. If she had just treated people with basic respect, she would still have her house, her reputation, and her freedom. But she chose power and control instead, and it destroyed her. The farmhouse continued to be everything I had hoped for. Helen and I adopted a dog, a golden retriever mix we named Ranger. He loved running around the property and riding in the truck with me when I went to plow jobs. Life was simple and good. One afternoon in the spring of 2028, almost 4 years after the whole mess began, I was working in my barn when a car pulled up the driveway. I did not recognize the vehicle, a newer model sedan with rental car plates. A woman got out. She was maybe 60 years old with gray hair and a kind face. She looked nervous. "Can I help you?" I asked, wiping grease from my hands with a rag. "Are you James Xavier?" "I am. My name is Margaret Henderson. Patricia Henderson is my daughter." I stiffened. "I am sorry, but I do not think we have anything to discuss." She held up her hands in a placating gesture. "Please, just hear me out. I drove all the way from Arizona. I just need 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat on the porch and Helen brought out iced tea, eyeing Margaret warily. "I wanted to apologize," Margaret began, "for what my daughter put you through. I know an apology does not fix anything, but I needed to say it. Your daughter is the one who owes me an apology, not you. I know. And she knows that too now. Prison gave her a lot of time to think. She has been in therapy working through some things. She realizes she was wrong. That is good for her." Margaret sighed. "Patricia asked me to give you this." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a letter. The letter was shorter than the previous one, less defensive. "Mr. Xavier, I owe you an apology that no words can adequately express. I abused my position as HOA president. I harassed you, tried to force you to work for free, and retaliated against you when you stood up for yourself. I told myself I was doing it for the good of the community, but that was a lie. I did it because I enjoyed the power and could not handle being challenged. You lost your home because of my actions. You had to uproot your life and start over. The check is a small attempt to compensate you for the legal fees and stress I caused. I know it is not enough. Nothing will ever be enough. But I wanted you to know that I understand what I did was wrong and I am sorry. Patricia Henderson." I stared at the check and the letter for a long moment. "What do you want me to say?" I asked Margaret. "Nothing. I just wanted to deliver it. What you do with it is up to you." After she left, Helen and I talked about it. The $5,000 would not come close to covering all the expenses I had incurred, but it was something. More importantly, it seemed like a genuine attempt at making amends. I thought about it for a few days, then made a decision. I deposited the check and donated the entire amount to a legal aid organization that helped homeowners fight abusive HOAs. It seemed fitting. I wrote a brief note back to Patricia, care of her mother's address. "Your apology is noted. I have donated your money to help other people who are dealing with what you put me through. I hope you have found peace. James Xavier." I never heard from her again. Looking back on the entire experience, it taught me a lot about standing up for yourself and knowing when to walk away. You cannot reason with unreasonable people. You cannot compromise with someone who sees compromise as weakness. Sometimes the only winning move is to remove yourself from the game entirely. Taking my plow truck and moving away from Meadowbrook Estates was the best decision I could have made. It cost me time and money in the short term, but it gave me peace and freedom in the long term. And in the end, Patricia's abuse of power caught up with her in ways I never could have orchestrated myself. Justice is not always swift, but it does eventually arrive. I still plow snow for a living. I still own that big Ford F550 with the custom setup, though I have upgraded some of the equipment over the years. When major storms hit, I am out before dawn, clearing driveways and parking lots, making sure people can get to work and live their lives. But I never again lived in an HOA. Helen and I bought additional land adjacent to our farmhouse, expanding our property to nearly 10 acres. We built a larger barn and added a guest house for when family visits. We planted apple trees and started a small orchard. We filled our life with projects we chose because we wanted to, not because some board dictated them. And every winter, when the first big snow falls and I fire up my truck to start plowing, I think about Patricia's demand that I do it all for free. I think about how absurd it was, how entitled she had been, and how she could not conceive of a world where people did not bend to her will. Then I think about how I moved away and took my truck with me, and how that simple act set off a chain of events that exposed her corruption and ended her petty tyranny. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well and letting karma handle the rest. My life is good. My marriage is strong. My business is thriving. And most importantly, I wake up every morning on my own property, with no HOA president telling me what color my mailbox should be or demanding that I work for free. That freedom is worth more than anything I left behind in Meadowbrook Estates. And I would make the same choice again in a heartbeat.